All right. I'm extremely, extremely excited to be doing this conversation right now. Joining me is the most interesting, I must admit, joining me is the most interesting person so far that I've spoken to, and it's Eric Lee, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. And he has been kind enough to join me and speak to us about a, believe it or not, blockchain startup, which is called Hub, and it's Human Trust Protocol. Um, Now, Eric Lee, I think just the fact that he was a co-founder of LinkedIn is a humongously self-explanatory thing. So I think that's clear. Let's just go straight into the purpose of Hub and the Human Trust Protocol. Eric, thank you so much for joining me. Tell us, why are you doing this?
Well, we have been working for many years on professional communities, social networks, and definitely it's created some very interesting successes, around connecting people. And but one of the things that we realized when we had communities of people were that people were often meeting each other for the first time, and they may be engaged in a business relationship, as a buyer or seller. They may be people may be marketing to one another, offering their services or products to one another, and so there are many opportunities for people on the internet to meet, and often you don't know who they are, and we believe that in order for successful uh, interactions and transactions to happen, you really need to have a basis of trust, and that's a problem that or that's a challenge that kind of pervades really many different kinds of social interactions on the internet. And so we thought that we could really do something about it with blockchain, was to really engender a sense of trust between people. And there's all these great things about blockchain. There's the immutability of it. Um, there is the authenticity of it. The fact that you can verify information on it. And there is also a lot of talk about trust, and on the blockchain. And so one of the big ideas, certainly, of blockchain is this idea of trustless transactions, and that's a really great concept. Rather than having a human intermediary connect with people and help parties engage in some kind of transaction, you're now relying on a computer program to help mediate the trust between two parties. But our realization was that before you get to trustless, you actually need trust in terms of being able to figure out who it is that you're going to be engaged with and interact with. And that's where we come in. The idea behind the Human Trust Protocol is to say, look, help you discover, trustworthy people, and help you kind of predict their ability to do what you expect of them, right? Based on maybe how they've done similar things in the past. So that's the idea basically behind the Human Trust Protocol.
So tell us then about, in sort of the most layman's possible terms, how does the system then work in terms of, I've spent my lifetime doing UX design and service design. So we talk about customer journeys end to end. So how does it work from sort of the beginning of the interaction to that kind of happy outcome, so to speak, in terms of the run through the system, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see, first of all, applicability in a variety of different kinds of platforms and applications. So ranging from things like online communities to peer-to-peer marketplaces to social networks and even onto messengers. In terms of large groups of people interacting with each other. And so the way that it works is that let's say since you're a designer, that you might have clients that are engaged, you're engaging in a project, and the idea is that we could actually represent the project as a smart contract, kind of tracking, the start of it and the end of it. And both you and the client would put down what we call trust stake into this little, into this task. And that stake is literally represented by, tokens. And so we are, creating a token called the hub token, which allows you to do that. And the stake is literally kind of a bond, serves as a bond that really commits both sides to act in a trustworthy way. So you as a designer, commit to successfully delivering the work, and the client successfully promises that if the work is done successfully, that they'll pay you. And so both sides have different interests, but they're committed to fulfilling their part of the interaction. And so the idea behind the smart contract is that it will not only allow people to stake, but also track the outcome of that interaction. And so that at the end of it, there's a reconciliation, there's a settlement that says that if everything was fine, everybody gets their stake back and also gets rewarded by the system with additional tokens that they can then use in future interactions. And if there is a problem, however, that gets resolved either by the parties themselves or through some kind of arbitrator or oracle, one of the parties might actually end up losing their stake because they failed to perform the task at hand. And the key part of it, though, is that through the smart contract that was tracking the beginning and the outcome of that interaction, there's a record of what happened, at least in this particular instance. And that record goes into the reputation history of the participants involved, both the vendor as well as the client. And that becomes a part of the reputation history. And that's the basis on which various methods of determining trust. One of the very frequent things that occurs in reputation is the scoring of reputation. So if you have engaged in a lot of projects, or if you engage in a lot of interactions, that data becomes a way that can be scored, and some certain trustworthiness score can be assigned to you, either as a vendor or even as a client. And so we see that pattern repeated in many different contexts, many different domains, many different industries, many different activities. And so we're going to, create some of those core interactions, but we also are, relying on the community to develop interesting interactions that can, again, kind of track the beginning and the outcome, which results in the generation of reputation data, which can be assessed for trustworthiness. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what the protocol is about.
And so do you see human trust protocol system, the hub token system, do you see that running more like white label solution, or is it like a place where people interact, or is it kind of something that gets injected into other systems as a layer that can just kind of live there, but then within the blockchain there is a kind of track record as to how trustworthy each user of that particular network is, and obviously in the case of you as a co-founder of LinkedIn, would human trust protocol be kind of injected into LinkedIn as an additional kind of layer of smartness of that platform? Is that how you envisage it, or is it all of them that you're looking to play into?
Yeah, so what we've defined is truly a protocol. It is a way to make portable trust and to exchange reputation data. And so it's a true protocol in that regard that can be used by many different applications, services, or communities. And so you can imagine that the way that we've explained it, the protocol actually will become a repository of a lot of valuable, reputation, data that can be analyzed in various different ways, depending on the context of the application or service or community. And so we want to support both new and existing applications for which trust and reputation is a vital component of those kinds of platforms. And again, it's marketplaces, online communities, social networks, messengers. Those are the places that we see it happening. We believe that it's going to take a little bit of effort, for sure. We're going to start by seeding the database that we have, the decentralized database that we have, with some existing data, and we'll be able to talk about that soon. And then, of course, via the tasks that can live on the protocol itself, it'll generate an additional set of data as well. So the idea is that we'll do that. We'll start to develop an interesting database. And one of the things that we'll do, as we mentioned in the white paper, is we'll actually build our own professional messenger. We believe that we've got to be one of the first to show that or prove even the value of this. And so we've got some ideas around how we can build a professional messenger that organizes professional communities, enables interactions and even transactions to happen on chain. And we're using that as a way to have a proof of concept, a reference implementation to prove that this protocol is valuable. And while we do that, we'll be putting a lot of information onto the blockchain as well. We will also work to partner up with other services, again, new or existing, that will find the reputation data useful. So, for example, if there's a service, they might very well want to have access to our data because there's a lot of valuable data about users, and it would help them make their communities and their services much more successful by either giving them new users or attributing more trust data to the users that they already have. And so we believe that in the long run, the data is going to be very valuable and useful to all sorts of different applications.
And so with regards to the token itself, then, is that something that you foresee? Because a lot of the people in the ICO community and the blockchain community use all sorts of matrices to evaluate values of these tokens, and there is different types of mindsets, right? As in, like, some people are much more traders, some people are looking to buy to hold, some people are looking to just use tokens as utility. Do you see this token going on exchanges, for example, and trust being something that's literally tradable on the market, or is it much more of a utility token? And tell us just a little bit about the money side of these things.
Yeah. So the hub token that we're creating, to some extent, it really is. It doesn't represent trust by itself. It represents an opportunity for trust. And the reason why we make that distinction, it may sound subtle, is that we never wanted to enable people or businesses to buy their trust. You can't buy it. That's very important. Otherwise, there's not a really great reason for this protocol to exist. So the token itself represents the opportunity to earn your trust. So that was a very important design goal. But having said that, we believe that trust has economic value. It allows you to, when you have it, to gain access to more economic opportunities, and it also allows you to essentially command a bit of a premium in terms of the pricing that you're offering to clients and so forth, just because people are willing to pay for trust, they're willing to pay for predictability. And so there is value in trust. And so people would want to hang on to these things to be able to use it for future activities and future interactions and transactions, that sort of thing. And so there is a real kind of currency to this token, which represents the ability to move forward and engage in further interactions with other participants. And so the idea is that you can accumulate these things, but you might end up having so many of them that it may be useful for somebody else to have the opportunity to earn their trust. And so there is the concept of being able to trade these tokens, to sell them to other people who want the opportunity to develop their reputation, and that's one of the main use cases. And then of course the other one is that we, as I mentioned earlier, we want to encourage a developer community to develop additional interactions that result in the generation of reputation data. And the way that we've set that up is that we have incentivized developers who are creating these templates to be compensated whenever their templates are used. And so that's also an economic incentive to participate in the ecosystem and create more kinds of different reputation data for the protocol.
So that leads perfectly into the growth side of things, because at Integral we have this model which I'm actually going through, which is to do with purpose. Businesses, all good businesses will be driven by purpose, then focused on people, systems, innovation, products, money, and growth. So we already covered some of those, but on the growth side, tell us a little bit more about how you are going to grow this and make it kind of the worldwide standard for human trust across the world, really.
Well, that's always a $64 million question, isn't it? At LinkedIn, we did a lot of those things, and we also learned a lot, from the whole LinkedIn experience in terms of how to develop a user base. And so the whole approach to user acquisition is something that we have quite a lot of experience with. There is no one magic bullet, but there's just a variety of different tools that you can bring to bear to essentially grow a user base. And so we intend to take basically a combination of all of those different methods, from data science to even doing things like marketing, which might be a bad word, but it is in fact useful to really help bring awareness and adoption and engagement to this protocol and the app that we were speaking of. But I will say, just to give a simple answer, is that there are many opportunities today where communities do need a greater sense of trust, for which there just isn't a lot of data. And one example of that that we want to attack very early on is actually the ICO process itself. So one of the things that we'll be talking about very soon is a service for evaluating trust around ICOs, the companies that put those things on, as well as the contributors and the investors who are interested in those in terms of KYC and so forth. So there are opportunities to start in new spaces that need a better sense of trust, and we certainly hope that by establishing ourselves there, we'll be able to find adjacent spaces and start spreading the value of the protocol from that point on.
So actually, I was going to ask you about kind of typical use cases, and you just touched on one of them, and that spawned off another question in my mind, is whether you see human trust protocol being available for both people as well as companies, because often the time I would say like a company is like a legal person. So will human trust protocol be available for companies? So for example, we could look up companies and go, that's a trust on the whole, that's a trustworthy company.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to encompass both individual users as well as companies. I mean, what's interesting about companies is that in many ways they need trust more than even individuals, because they interact not with other single individuals at any given time, but really a whole group of individuals. We call them, companies call them customers, or even partners, and so they are motivated to interact with groups of people at at any given time. And so, in terms of let's say the staking that they would have to create, they would have even more demand for the tokens themselves. So it's definitely a use case that we would be highly interested to do, and hopefully incentivize organizations and businesses to become more trustworthy in the future.
And so, okay, I know you must be busy, and I'd love to speak to you for hours, but let's just wrap it up with one or two more questions. So, what are you focusing on right now, and what are your sort of plans for next, let's say, 2-3 months? Because I'm sure this is going to kind of iterate as you go along.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty busy roadmap. We're actively working on the technology right now. The protocol first version is starting to be built, and then we're working on this test application that we call around the ICO process. And we're also looking for early partners who can see a use case for themselves with the protocol. We're lucky that we already have quite a few partners who have expressed interest in partnering with us on the protocol. And we want to work closely with them to develop some very interesting use cases where trust can become valuable to what they're doing. And we'll learn a lot through this thing, but I believe by the end we'll have created a pretty valuable public utility for the internet. So we'd like to think of ourselves as kind of creating a new trust layer for the internet. So that's what we try to do.
And so, just one more question before we wrap up. Which blockchain platform are you building this on? Is it Ethereum, or are you building something of your own from the start, or how is it going to work?
Yeah, we're trying to take advantage of existing platforms as much as we can. So currently we're developing on Ethereum. We are looking for some other platforms that may be able to offer us some additional capabilities in terms of scalability and lower costs. So, for example, Stellar is something that we're looking at quite closely. And there's some other platforms as well that are in the mix that are kind of the usual suspects. So we're evaluating those as well. But needless to say, the blockchain platforms themselves are evolving quite quickly, and so we are doing our best to stay on top of the developments.
And so just for everyone else who's going to be watching this on demand, like what are you, in terms of types of partners that you're looking for to work with you in this kind of early stage development? Can you just tell us a little bit more about, are you looking for companies or people or developers or what?
Yeah, we really just have kind of one key requirement, which is that we want to look for, we want to partner with either people or organizations that are passionate about a certain use case. Maybe they come from a domain that they understand quite a lot. Whether it's commerce or legal or financial. I believe that actually within these large areas there actually are many sub use cases that's as well. And so we want to understand from them how we can apply the protocol to help them do something useful. It's very important for us that we bring this protocol to real world use cases, and we'd like to do that as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. It's been wonderful chatting to you, and I really, truly appreciate and respect that you jumped on this live stream. We're going to share this throughout our community, and I'm sure like lots of people are going to watch it on demand. In London, it's still kind of quite early. I think people start traveling for work and so on. But we're needless to say, this thing is very much, super interesting, and I'm keeping a close eye on it, looking forward to it, rolling out, even just early stages, kind of, some sort of hackable ecosystem or play area where even as developers, we might kind of play around with it a little bit and see how, and start thinking really how we can integrate this as a, UX and service designer, this kind of layer of capability. I can see it, being integrated into banks, into any sort of financial realm, as you said, legal, as well as, as a designer doing lots of freelance work as well. It's kind of like I want to work with a client. It would be great to check them up in that sense and sort of have that additional piece of reassurance that it's worthwhile working with them and so on. So thank you so much, Eric, and keep up at the good work, and we'll keep in touch, and maybe we can have another conversation in maybe 6 months again to see where you've got to and the update.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, and for your interest. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.